gone crazy here?
And this is the power.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Hollywood. Hollywood, the dream factory, where nights are bright and days are spent mid roses and rainbows.
It's not what I'm talking about. Just imagine what it must have looked like in the 30s. Oh, the parties they must have had here, the stars, the glamour. Think how it must have looked when it was new.
Think of what it would look like if it was clean.
Who is that?
I kid playing dress up. Hey, what do you think this is, man? Halloween?
Honey, I don't think that's him.
I don't care who it is, man. You just stay the fuck away from me.
Hey, you gotta help me. I'm being chased by a crazed killer biker.
What?
Where's Lorraine?
I don't know, we got separated.
One victim is believed to be a transient, while the rest appear to be males and females in their early 20s. All of the killings took the form of violent mutilations with no apparent motive.
Chip, did you hear that?
Hi, I'm Elaine Beauty from My Bloody Valentine and The Incubus, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to The Hysteria Continues, episode 229. And this time we're going back to old Hollywood for a previously lost movie, Terror Night, from 1987, aka Bloody Movie, which was MIA, missing in action, until I think around about 2004, when it got a very, very belated release. So this was one of those, we always talk about those fabled lost slashers, the ones that were made and never saw the light of day. And this was one of them for the best part of 20 years. So this was a suggestion to the show, and I've forgotten to write down who suggested it in the feedback last time. So whoever it was, it's your fault. But we will be talking about that a little bit later. So before we do that, let's see. We'll see how we've been getting on. Erik, how are you doing?
Why am I a whore?
That's the eternal question, Erik.
Because you made me that way.
As you can see, the 10th anniversary hasn't changed us.
I'm still trigger happy with my soundboard.
Yes, you are. So, well, thank you, Erik. Anyway, I'm glad to hear you've still got a finger up it or in it or whatever. So, Nathan, how are you?
I brought my own mic.
Is that another Simpsons reference I don't get?
Yeah, it's Dr. Joyce Brothers. Have you ever heard of her, Justin? Dr. Joyce Brothers?
On The Simpsons?
No, like she's an actual psychiatrist.
No, I haven't. Have you heard of Dr. Joyce Brothers?
Have you never heard of her?
Has Erik?
Maybe she was a more of American staple.
Yeah. Erik, have you ever heard of Dr. Joyce Brothers?
Only from The Simpsons. I didn't realize it was a real person.
Ah, okay. So, and Joseph, are you in sunny Tennessee, or is it snowing there? What's it like where you are in the world at the moment?
I don't know. I just woke up. I overslept, so I haven't looked out my window. By the way, I'm in Georgia, not Tennessee.
Yeah, Justin.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought you were known as Justin Geography Curzon.
Well, I gave that title up. It's my new resolution after the 10th anniversary that I'd no longer be known as that, although that was just this one episode. So anyway, yes, we are back, and we are going to be talking about Terror Night a little bit later on. Got some interesting background on that one, and it's going to be interesting to have a chat about because, well, I think it's a bit of a mess of a movie, but not without its charms. But before we do that, let's have a quick chat about what we've been watching recently. So, Erik, if you had a chance to catch up with anything since we last recorded.
Only stuff that for future episodes of the podcast. The only, I suppose you could call this as a horror film, as many considered it the major horror of 2019. I saw Cats, which is the big screen adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's stage musical, and I think it's been harshly treated, to be honest. I won't go into any detail because it's not a horror film and probably of little interest to anyone, but I found it mildly entertaining and diverting, and I don't see what the fuss about it being the worst movie of all time is coming from. I just don't get the critics' reaction. To me, it was no worse than The Greatest Showman or something like Dreamgirls, I mean, they all. I'm not a musicals enthusiast or fan by any means, so they all kind of merge into one for me.
You do seem to have seen quite a few of them, though, Erik.
Yeah, well, that's because I have a significant other who is enthusiastic about musicals, so I've seen a few by osmosis. But for me, Cats was no worse than a lot of the other ones I've seen. I found it mildly diverting, and some of the tunes are actually quite catchy. So there we go. In terms of horror, I'm still reading that wonderful book Taking Shape 2, which is talking about all the unproduced sequels to the Halloween franchise, starting from part 4 up until the reboot, and it's just so interesting and so engrossing, and it gives you an interesting insight into particularly how Dimension Pictures worked and how horrible they were to work for, but also how eager they were to have ludicrous concepts shoehorned into the Halloween franchise, with Mustafa Akkad on the other side of the coin for Trancas International, trying desperately to keep them on track and to keep some sort of logic and internal logic to the sequels, whereas you had Harvey and Bob Weinstein trying to, do all kinds of weird things with the Thorn cult and all that. So it's a really, really interesting book if you have any interest in the Halloween franchise, or even if you don't. I think it's just interesting to see what kind of pitches were being thrown their way and how ridiculous the Halloween franchise could have gone in so many ways had they been allowed to progress with some of these ideas. It's a really good book.
Yeah, I hear there's a Thorn subplot that they didn't use where Harvey Weinstein exposes himself to Michael Myers.
He's probably the one person that he didn't sleep with in Hollywood.
Probably.
Well, we don't know.
My night of passion with Halloween's Michael. Harvey Weinstein exclusive.
So, well, thank you, Erik. Did they? Talking of Cats, did they take out or did they add in CGI buttholes? I wasn't sure.
CGI what?
Buttholes, cats' butts.
I wasn't paying attention to their buttholes, in all honesty, Justin, because I'm not that lowbrow. I'm quite highbrow, I think you'll find.
Right. Well, thank you, Erik. Nathan, how about you?
Unfortunately, aside from future episodes, I just haven't had time to watch anything. We've got like a Made-for-TV Mayhem coming up, so I've been watching those as well. It's just been a busy time.
Well, that's okay. It's, we all have to cram things in, don't we? So, Joseph, how about you?
No recently seen from me either this week, I'm afraid. I've been completely uninterested in TV outside of what we've been doing for the show, so I just haven't seen anything, but maybe this week I'll watch something.
Okay, well, tune in next time. The Hysteria continues, recently seen. But yes, we've been very busy with various things. We've got another commentary or a few commentaries in the bag. So wait for those announcements coming soon, hopefully. But for me, I've been quite busy, although I did catch up with the Scream Factory release of a film which I used to own on VHS before I got rid of my VHS collection before we moved abroad, from the mid-1980s, Night of the Creeps, which was a firm favourite of mine back in the VHS days. So I was keen to see how it held up on the Scream Factory Blu-ray, and I'm glad to say it held up very well. It's still, easily one of the funnest, is that not even the word, but it's an incredibly fun mid-80s monster movie, kind of mashup of like zombies, monsters, aliens and slashers, basically. So it's kind of a monster mash of a lot of the early 80s or the early to mid 80s horror obsessions of Hollywood and independent producers everywhere. So the only thing it's suffered, but it's not say suffered exactly, but on the pristine presentation is the special effects looked a lot more rubbery than I remember them looking on VHS. But we've talked about that many times with the kind of the Blu-rays of things like Sam Raimi's The Original Evil Dead. Having said that, the fact is that you've got Tom Atkins sort of making cracks about B movies, and this is very much playing into those. So the rubbery special effects and the gore effects, which are plentiful, it just adds to the charm. So great, sort of great 80s chemistry between the young cast. And some great supporting sort of older players as well. So all round fun movie. And I imagine there isn't probably anyone here who doesn't like Night of the Creeps, or am I wrong?
Oh, I love it.
I love it too. Yeah.
Thrill me.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah. Well, that's pretty much. Did I mention The Devil's Reign on the last episode? I can't remember.
It was in your top 3 of 1975. Yeah.
Well, you'll have to. Well, of course, I didn't mention it on the main show, did I? Well, it's just kind of. Well, if you want to hear, I saw The Devil's Reign for the first time ever, and it was part of my top 3 1975. So, if you do want to hear my thoughts on that, then jump over to Patreon after listening to this and sign up to support the show. So, well. I guess it's time to go back to old Hollywood. Well, I say old Hollywood in 1987, when a group of kids sneak into the dilapidated, apparently abandoned mansion of vanished silent film star Lance Haywood. They are methodically killed off by the psychotic actor who dons costumes from his classic film roles for each murder. So that is a very short synopsis for Terror Night, aka Bloody Movie, which was a movie that, when we get into background, explain possibly why it kind of disappeared. Well, it was never really seen. So it's slightly ironic. The film is about this vanished silent film star, Lance Haywood, who I say was played by John Ireland. I use that in inverted commas because John Ireland turns up at the end of the movie for 5 minutes and then does, for some bizarre reason, which is never quite explained, does a soliloquy from Othello. But the essence of the movie is it's a very conflicted movie, basically. It has a very, very kind of early to mid 80s aesthetic, or the idea of, you essentially getting a group of kids, or basically people in their early 20s, who go up to the mansion of Lance Haywood, which presumably had been up in the Hollywood Hills, that had been abandoned for many years, and it had been bought by a kind of a real estate company, and going to be torn down the following day. So they go up there, and for some bizarre reason, even though they're in their early 20s, many of them seem to be great fans of Lance Haywood, who hasn't made a film since 1940. So basically, if you're looking for anything to make sense in this movie, forget it, really. But at its essence, what it is kids go to dilapidated mansion, kids get dead movie. Until the end of the movie, where it's for the first 2/3 of it, that's what it is. And the killer, who is clearly not John Ireland, who turns up, say, like for the last 5 minutes or so, and it has a kind of a splattering of kind of older film stars, people possibly, I'd say, fair to say, are kind of past their prime. I mean, it has Alan Hale Jr., not Alan Dale, unfortunately, but Alan Hale, who was skipper on Gilligan's Island, and also you have kind of cameos, really, of just sort of older stars who turn up and die, basically. Sort of Dan Haggerty, who was Grizzly Adams. Cameron Mitchell sort of turns up for 5 minutes at the end of the movie as like a police chief, and of course he was in, quite a few slashes around the time. I mean, he was in Blood and Black Lace and The Demon, Trapped Alive, also Memorial Valley Massacre. And Aldo Ray, who turns up and plays a drunk for 5 minutes, was also in Terror on Alcatraz for a bit longer, another slash movie from '87. Was also in films like Evils of the Night and Dark Sanity. So they kind of turn up, collect a paycheck, and get killed, basically. But the younger cast essentially are in the mansion, running around the mansion and being picked off one by one by this mysterious figure who kind of, basically dresses as things like the Sheikh and the kind of Zorro style kind of characters from his films, and sort of kills them in methods that he used to kill people in his movies. So as a movie, it's an odd one, really, because it kind of plays like a straight-ahead slasher for much of it. Then it goes off in a very weird tangent towards the end of the movie, and it makes very little sense whatsoever. So it's kind of understandable kind of why the movie perhaps didn't get released, although I do have some other theories about why that would be the case when you sort of hear some background on it. But at its heart, it's a conflicted movie. It doesn't make a great deal of sense, but it does have some fun performances in it. It has a charm to it, and I don't know if it's because of the kind of COVID fatigue and whatever, but they're going back and watching Night of the Creeps is some of these 80s horror movies are like putting on a pair of bloody slippers and, the comfort horror, I think, in some ways. And this has a lot of that. It has some echoes of better movies from before, but it actually has a likable central cast. So that helps carry a lot of it through. But I reviewed this back on Hysteria Lives. I can't remember when it was. And the funny thing, and I don't know if it says much about the movie or it says a lot about my memory or whatever it is, but I couldn't remember much of the movie. So when I was watching it, it was almost like I was watching it for the first time. So I'm going to be interested to hear what you guys think of it. Is it a first-time watch for you guys? Have you seen it before?
First time watch for me.
First time watch. Well, Erik, what were your thoughts on Terror Night?
Well, I mean, I thought as you said, the premise is enticing. I mean, it's a very basic premise. It's teens and some bikers actually in an abandoned house menaced by a killer. So I thought, okay, it's got that going for it. So the setup is kind of, I suppose, Night of the Demons meets Friday the 13th Part 3. But I don't know, it doesn't quite live up to the premise for me. The film is kind of the epitome of late 80s, let's make films purely for product for the shelves of VHS stores and for no other reason, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because like a lot of them can be quite good. But this one I felt a bit flat and lifeless in between, some pretty fun gore scenes, which are pretty lo-fi. The use of the stock footage and the brief cameos of faded film stars coming in to be killed off after 2 or 3 minutes kind of gave it that disjointed Doris Wishman feel, I thought. I mean, there is bits in it I did like, as you were saying, like most notably there's a cameo by the rugged Dan Haggerty, who's very wooden as he delivers his scant few lines of dialogue, and incidentally I was also wooden watching him deliver his lines. And I quite envied the killer actually getting to penetrate him with his big spear.
Not Aldo Ray. I would have thought would have had you pegged down as an Aldo Ray.
Well, yeah, but Dan Haggerty has the beard, although he needs to lose the Barry Gibb hairstyle because that's a big no-no to my culture. I think the location is good, the abandoned house and all that, and I love the goofy bikers because it's a very 80s view of what biker chic was. A leather waistcoat on the males and he has long hair and earrings, and they talk more like surfers. Like the girl when she goes into the house is like, dude, whoa, check this out. And one interesting thing I noted about the house when they break in is that it's all covered in like gothy cobwebs and has open bottles of wine everywhere. And I was wondering, who would live in a house like that? I was wondering. I love the film buffery that's gone into the script. I mean, that whole scene about the volatile nature of nitrate prints, and when they're talking about the robotics and the prosthetic effects that they use in movies, I thought, okay, that shows a degree of thought has gone into this script and it has that in-depth knowledge, and I liked those scenes. And some of the deaths are interesting. There's a decapitation that's almost an exact replica of the one in Hell Night, and there's another girl falls into a pit of spikes, and there's a guy who has his torso ripped in half, which is kind of like a lower 5 version of a similar effect in Day of the Dead. But on the whole, I said that the film kind of felt a bit flat to me and failed to hold my attention. There was no suspense or excitement for it. Maybe towards the end when Cameron Mitchell shows up, there's a scene where one of the main characters is killed off at that point, and it came as a genuine surprise. But for me, it felt like a sort of a less successful version of something like The Horror Star, which itself is a very flawed film, but I thought it was a more entertaining version of this kind of storyline. And even like it has shades of Fade to Black, which is a much better film as well. That imagined sort of daydream stage performance at the end, as you were talking about there, it felt very tacked on, as if they said they needed another 10 minutes for the running time, so they just threw that in. That's what it feels like. But part of me was kind of wishing that it had more of a patchwork feel and was more rough around the edges than it actually was, because then it might have that je ne sais quoi that something like Boarding House or Night to Dismember had. The films are just so piecemeal and weird that they have a real entertainment value, whereas this one, as I said, it just felt a bit meh, I suppose is the word I'm looking for most of its running time. I mean, it's not bad at all, and considering I'm assuming that there was lots of production problems with it and the budget was exceptionally low, I think they've done well to bring out a film that is relatively cohesive. And I think if this type of late 80s low budget straight to video horror floats your boat, which sometimes it does for me, but sometimes it doesn't, and this is the ones that maybe doesn't. So, but I think a lot of people will get a lot out of the film, more than I will. So, yeah, it's a very, very run-of-the-mill film from my perspective, but not awful.
Okay, well, thank you, Erik. What about you, Nathan?
I really enjoyed it. I had seen it way back when it first got released on DVD. But honestly, it was one of those movies I didn't remember much about at all. And I mean, just on a down note, rewatching it, I could kind of understand why. I don't know that it's a very memorable movie, but I was fairly entertained. I can see what Erik is saying, because it's like they didn't try to go for any suspense at all. The music itself is not very suspenseful. And actually it's even some scenes it seems more like an 80s comedy, like when the bikers are chasing some of the teenagers. It's done in that 80s comical way, like an 80s comic chase scene or something. It's just really funny. But the kills themselves, they are great, but there's no suspenseful build up for them. It's just, I enjoyed it, but I was like, I feel like they could have did more with some things. That being said, the different death scenes are great. I thought that Michelle Bauer as Jo was absolutely hysterical. She was probably my favorite character in it. I love the scene where she looks out the door and sees Sherry walking in the hallway, and instead of assuming it could be a human or anything, she immediately runs back to her boyfriend and is like, "There's a ghost in this mansion," and is dead serious. She thinks that it's a ghost. So I thought that was kind of funny because it was so ridiculous. And then in her death scene, I don't know, it was something else. I thought it was funny that her boyfriend got beat up by one of the teen guys, and he's way bigger than that guy. So that was really funny to me too. I love the song that's playing when Sherry and her boyfriend are in the bathtub in the beginning of the movie. I thought that was a lot of fun, the song they were playing, but of course I can't find it anywhere except for in this movie. But that is what it is.
Are you saying there wasn't an official soundtrack released?
I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked. I still don't know what was going on with that ending. Spoiler alert: how do you kiss someone to death?
Well, if you got a tongue like mine, it's very easy.
Ooh. I just don't understand how it killed her. I mean, it just seems the ending is just really weird. It almost feels like a dream sequence or something. But I mean, it is what it is. But no, overall, the setting is great. The plot is great. I mean, it's got its flaws, but overall, it's definitely a lot better than something like Hollywood's New Blood. But I do feel if they had gone more overboard with it, it could have been a trash classic. Just my opinion.
Okay, well, thank you, Nathan. What about you, Joseph?
Yeah, Terror Night. I watched it earlier this week and then partially again last night, and I cannot for the life of me remember much of anything that happens in this movie other than the ridiculous amount of stock footage before each murder, and I remember an obscene amount of exposition. I mean, you could literally call this movie Exposition Night because every other scene is some sort of monologue explaining the history of this Lance Hayward character and his fortune, how he seemingly vanished from Hollywood. I mean, I think they even at one point go to great lengths to pin down his age and his filmography to almost an exactness, but, nothing on why he decides to go on a killing spree at all, unless I missed it. Frankly, I didn't really care. And certainly there's nothing on why a bunch of, your typical late 80s teens would care enough to break into a silent film star's estate. But, this being 1987, of course, I love the aesthetic, the feathered hair and the polo shirts. And normally that would be almost enough to warrant a film recommendation if the characters were memorable. But I honestly, I would fail at naming a single one of them outside of, a girl with giant hoop earrings or a drunken glam rock biker couple. When we get to some of the goofier death scenes, I think I might have chuckled a time or two. I mean, I love that opening murder with the guy being pulled off, as it were, and his torso is about 4'2" long to look even remotely close to being real. So I did get a kick out of that. But honestly, as the film went along, I started to understand why it was never released. I mean, I've certainly seen worse, but even some of the worst movies have a hook or something. I mean, this was just, like Erik said, this was just bland. I don't think I've been this bored or uninterested in a movie since we covered what was that movie with the clowns and they were a rock band, Terror on Tour.
Terror on Tour.
Yeah, I haven't been this uninterested in a film since then. I mean, this is just like I blink my eyes and it's over with, and I'm like, okay, so it's a thumbs down for me, I'm afraid. There's a few bits and pieces in it that I liked, like that opening death, and I think the dog might have been the most interesting character in the film, if I'm honest. But yeah, I can see why this is possibly, why it was never released. So that's my tuppence on it.
Well, thank you. One thing I was going to say was Nathan was talking about if it had gone a bit further, it could have been like a trash classic. Because the original ending, as far as I'm aware, was the idea really was that Lance Haywood was a kind of, he was... and it kind of hinted that throughout that he basically kept himself alive because he would have been in his 90s. He was going to keep himself alive and he turned himself into a robot. And so there was a scene with the animatronic hand, and if you look very closely in the last scene where you've got the final girl and him, and he for some reason he's blacked up, isn't he, as Othello, which is very strange in itself, and he's giving this basically going through Othello with her, and she grabs its face and she pulls some stuff away, and you see, if you look closely, you can see some silver underneath. So the original ending was meant to be that they would pull him off his face anyway. He'd be like Davros, like in the Daleks. So he'd be this withered little man inside this biomechanical suit. And part of the reason why they didn't go down that route was because probably budgetary reasons, I imagine, and also John Ireland flatly refused to wear any prosthetics. So instead, they had this very strange ending. Of this kind of Othello ending, which again was, and apparently this is getting into a little bit of background, but I'll just stop at this point. Was that the one of the things they wanted to make, the producer wanted to make with Andrei Titov, who was one of the three directors on this movie, and apparently he only directed that last scene, but they wanted to make a Macbeth in space as their next film. And so with a view of John Ireland, presumably in playing one of the lead characters in a space-bound Macbeth adaptation, which is why they did an Othello scene. And apparently that was one of the reasons they attracted him to this role, was telling him that he'd get a chance to play Shakespeare because he'd always wanted to.
Boy, he must have been disappointed when he finally got on set.
Well, exactly. But and that's why I think a lot of these people didn't put their name to the movie. But the thing I didn't understand, let me get this right. So you've got this Lance Haywood character who's disappeared since when they have 20 years or so, and his house is about to be ripped down. But he also has $20 million in his house, doesn't he? So rather than just going back to his house and saying, and they said they can't get hold of him, and no one's heard of him for 20 years. So rather than just go, here I am, it's my house, fuck off, he goes back, kills a bunch of people for no reason, really, that I could see. He could have just said, no, I own this house, leave it alone.
Maybe his robotic circuits have been scrambled, and he's not thinking properly.
He kills people that are his fans. Who does that?
Well, exactly, yes. Although, to be fair, it was only really that one woman was his fan, wasn't it?
I think a lot of our fans, if they listen to this episode, it's going to kill them. So,
well, anyway, to be honest, again, it's one of those movies where the background information is arguably a lot more interesting than the actual film itself. But have you guys got anything you want to put forward, Erik?
Yeah. What do I have? It's really just literally about some of the cast and what they went on to do or what they did before. So the director it's credited to Nick Marino, and this is his sole directorial outing, but he was part of the production team on a favourite of Nathan's, Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. The second unit director was Fred J. Lincoln, who we most famously know, I think, as Weasel in Last House on the Left. But he was also a porn actor and director whose credits include such wonderful titles as The Last Whorehouse on the Left, Willy Wankers and the Fun Factory, Friday the 13th, A Nude Beginning, Anal Intruder 10, and my favourite title, Abducted by the Enema Bandit. So there we go, some of his classics. John Ireland is not from Ireland. He's from Canada, which is surely someone should contact Trades Descriptions folk about that. But he was nominated for an Oscar in 1949 for his role in All the King's Men. Of course, we would know him from a later role in The Incubus in 1981. And, like a good few Hollywood stars, he found himself in his later years in low-budget exploitation movies. So he was in things like Messenger of Death and Waxwork 2. You already mentioned Alan Hale, not Alan Dale, from Gilligan's Island. I recognise him from Bill Raban's Giant Spider Invasion. So that's what I see him. Stacey Greason, I think is how you say her surname. She was also in Friday the 13th Part 7 opposite William Butler. They were boyfriend and girlfriend in that. She played Jane. They get killed early on in that film. Ken Abraham, who plays Greg, was in Creepazoids around this time. Did a lot of low-budget movies and TV guest spots, but he started working in the art department of huge budget movies. So he worked in the art department of Maverick, Colour of Night, Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, Clueless, Batman and Robin. And he's now an editor, and he edited one of Justin's favourite TV shows, America's Next Top Model, which I didn't think was still going, but it appears to be. Aldo Ray, you mentioned, he was also in Human Experiments, Don't Go Near the Park, Centerfold Girls, and Psychic Killer. Dan Haggerty, I should say, plays the role bearded biker in two different movies, Angels Die Hard and Chrome and Hot Leather. Of course, he found fame as Grizzly Adams in the movie, the subsequent TV series, and all the spin-offs, and he was permanently typecast as rugged, hairy mountain man. That's totally begging for it in all the roles he did afterwards. So he again was relegated to low-budget horror, but there is one in his catalogue that sounds kind of interesting. I'd like to see. It's called The Chilling from 1989, where he stars opposite Linda Blair. About bodies in a cryogenic facility.
I used to have that poster. I love that poster of the zombie looking out from the meat locker door.
Oh, have you ever seen the movie? Because it sounds
the movie's really just, it's kind of like Terror Night. It's kind of bland, but it's still kind of fun. I think it's a little more fun, honestly.
Okay, well, it's got Dan Haggerty as the eye candy and then Linda Blair as kind of the fun part. So I'm just wondering if it might be worth watching for me anyway. So that's all I have. I don't really have any background on the production of the movie itself, but I dread your background, Justin, because you mentioned a tiny bit of it to us, and it made me feel ill. There's a 2-word phrase in there that always makes me feel sick.
Well, we'll come on to that literally a little bit later. But Nathan, how about you? Have you got anything for us?
No.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Joseph?
Yeah, apparently Andrew DeToth wore a neck brace during shooting after suffering some sort of injury. I didn't find out what injury that was. One of the shooting locations was also, again, apparently, an estate which once belonged to Errol Flynn. Most sources say the first official release was in 2004 under the Bloody Movie title, though some say it got a release in 1997, though none of the materials I looked into named a format or distributor for this supposed 1997 release, so I don't know. Maybe you have more on that, Justin. I did attempt... before I watched the movie, I should remind you, I did attempt to snag an interview from William Butler, but was told to, quote unquote, wait for the book. And now that I've seen the movie, I'm not interested, William. Sorry.
Ooh, shade.
I actually am interested to hear what people have to say that worked on this movie, though.
I would be too, yeah.
Well, thank you, Joseph. Well, if you're interested in hearing what people said about who worked on the movie, I stumbled when I was doing some research across a fantastic book, which I'd heard about before, but I bought the Kindle version of it. It came from the 80s, interviews with 124 cult filmmakers by Francesco Borsetti, I think is probably not pronouncing his name correctly. And he interviews lots of people involved in a number of movies that sort of came out in the 1980s, as it sounds like. So he interviews quite a few people involved on this movie, mostly people, some of the actors, but a few people behind the camera as well. So I'll attempt to just mention some of those sort of bits. I think the film was probably shot in kind of around August, sort of late summer 1987. There was a piece in the New York Daily News from September 1987 that said John Ireland had placed a work wanted in the trades, like a Variety, presumably a box office magazine, saying that he was looking for work, and he's contacted by Nick Marino for Terror Night, but it said in this piece that he'd injured his back playing tennis the day before shooting started, so Dan Haggerty had to step in, which kind of seems very strange. If you've seen the movie, Dan Haggerty is in the movie for literally 30 seconds before he gets impaled. So I think it sounds like it's a very troubled production. Nick Marino is an interesting character because Nick Marino is, and a lot of this goes in, and I'm saying this allegedly because obviously I don't want to get into trouble, but Nick Marino was essentially made his name in porn movies. He was a porn producer, and he kind of basically wanted to get into, inverted commas, legit filmmaking, making some horror movies. He also made this and the zombie movie Death House, which was directed by John Saxon around about the same time. Some of the people who worked on that film said, including John Saxon, said that Nick Marino had certain, how can I put it, sort of associates who would come and visit the film who looked like gangsters. And Nick Marino's found out, I think when he was 13, that his own father was a mafia hitman. So I think there were allegations that there was mob money behind these two movies. Now, I don't know, and again, I'm just saying allegedly, but I do wonder partly if the reason why neither of these movies that came out until they got released in 2004 on Fred Olen Ray's Retromedia label, that possibly I've heard about this happening before, that as kind of films made as tax write-offs with no real, so actually putting money into a film just so you can write it off against tax with no real intention of the film ever being released. I'm not saying that happened with this, but that's one of the theories about why the movie was never released. The other one was that with this movie was that they didn't clear the rights for the any of the older footage, because the film, every time Lance Haywood is about to kill somebody, some clips from old films, usually Errol Flynn or those kind of films from the 1930s, those kind of serial films, would play before that. And apparently they hadn't got hadn't even attempted to get any kind of rights to those movies. So although the film was screened with a view for it being sold, nobody would touch it with a barge pole because of the threat of being sued. And if you listen to our Fade to Black commentary for Vinegar Syndrome, it's one of the things that plagued that production as well, was when they used some of the old clips from movies, they had to change them around, or they got sued by the estate of Hopalong Cassidy, of all people. So that was possibly one of the reasons why it didn't get released, although why it suddenly got released in 2004, I don't know. I didn't find any information, Joseph, about it getting released previous to that, but maybe it got some kind of a release. I did see someone saying it got released somewhere in Germany in the early 2000s was the first release it got.
Yeah, I read Australia, but it could have been Germany, or it could have been both. I don't know. Yeah,
but the thing, some of the other interesting things from this book, and so I do check out that book if you're kind of interested in this. But it has some interviews, and Murray Levy, who was one of the writers on Terror Night, he said Nick Marino had an idea of he wanted to do a film about Star killing people. Now, of course, we sort of mentioned it's very similar to The Horror Star with Jeffrey Combs from 1981, 81, 82, and also Fade to Black. So whether or not he kind of borrowed from that. But John Saxon, I think, said that Nick Marino, when they made Death House, was he would go and see a film the night before, like Scar. He said they used an example of Scarface, and he'd come back and say, make it more like Scarface. And he said he kept on coming every film he saw. If he'd seen Annie the night before, he'd come and say, make it more like Annie. So he didn't really know what he was doing really. So he kept on changing his mind, which might explain why. And apparently he wanted to, originally the idea was to make a more of a straight-head slasher movie, but he kept on changing his mind throughout it and adding these other bits to it. So it's why the film's a little bit of a mess. So Murray Levy says he wrote the original script, and Kenneth Hall rewrote it and polished it. As you mentioned, the beginning of the film was made on the remains of the old Errol Flynn mansion. When I was looking into this, apparently the Errol Flynn mansion, it was a bit of an urban legend, because although it's gone into urban legend that it was his mansion, apparently it's somewhere he stayed in a guest house after he lost his mansion due to alimony payments. And it's a place called Runyon Canyon, which is in LA, which is it was rumored to be haunted by a dead opera star, apparently. But now it's kind of a quite famous kind of park in Los Angeles. But the place where Errol Flynn stayed burnt down in 1972. So what you see there is kind of like the remains of it. Where they actually shot the majority of it was actually a nunnery. So they had loads of nuns running around this place trying to find out what they were actually making. Apparently they submitted a fake script to the nuns, and they had to bolt the doors to stop them coming in while they were filming the sex scene, more of which later. But the area, this Runyon Canyon, was at the time, it was kind of a place where lots of homeless people lived. And apparently there was quite a time of famous, not massacre, but somebody shot a load of homeless people up there in 1980. And the news, I think the LA Times described it as a home for hobos, coyotes, and rattlesnakes. And one of the special effects crew, when they were shooting up there, said that they left their cars there while they were shooting, and someone broke in, presumably a homeless person, stole all the stuff in the cars, which included all their props they were going to use for some of the killings. And one of those was a bow and arrow. And they said they were shooting and they were worried that they were going to be shot from behind the bushes by a homeless person with a bow and arrow, which would have been art imitating life a little bit too closely, perhaps. So just going back to it's very confused. In this book, the recollections of who directed what seem very, very confused. It sounds like it started with the guy from The Last House on the Left. And apparently he got fired or left because of drugs and women or something. This is what somebody was saying. And Nick Marino took over and finished the film. And Andrei Titov, he only filmed the last sequence. But then someone else said, and this Murray Levy says that he says that he watched Andrei Titov filming a few scenes, and he thought they had a hit on their hands, but he said he had to leave the production because of a hurt neck. I think you mentioned that, Joseph. And I saw two different reasons. One was saying that he fell over and banged his head on a generator because it was so dark up there. And the other one I saw, he got pulled off by a Dalmatian.
Justin?
Well, pulled over by a Dalmatian. So which one it was, I don't know. So he said that he said that Fred Lincoln had drug and women issues, although he was making at the same year. He's like you said, Erik, he made Friday the 13th: A New Beginning the same year, and he went on to make 10 years after this was made, a porno version of Terror Night, which I don't know if it's exactly a remake of this film, but he directed a film called Terror Night, which was a porno. So presumably it was possibly based on this. He said that Aldo Ray who plays this kind of drunk hobo, was in a very bad way and was so drunk that he lost his pants ahead of shooting one scene, and had delayed lots of things. So the fact is, again, method acting. Aldo Ray was drunk during his scenes while he was actually shooting them. So he says that originally it was mentioned they couldn't get clearance they didn't even try and get clearance for the old footage. And Murray Levy says that Nick Marino vanished into thin air at some point. So I don't know if anyone's ever heard of him since, but he kind of disappeared. The Kenneth J. Hall, who took on the script, he said the original script was ridiculous. The killer would be in his 80s. So he came up with the idea that he had this biomechanical suit that kept him young. he says he fell out with Marino, but he says that Fred Lincoln directed the majority of the picture. And I mentioned that the idea was to have this ending scene was really a teaser trailer for their Macbeth in Space, which Andrei Titov, who of course directed the amazing Vincent Price 3D movie House of Wax, and of course is the father of the lead in Nightmare Beach as well. Linnea Quigley was cast in the movie, but apparently quit before she could start. Cleve Hall, who did some of the special effects, he also did some of the special effects on what's it called? Not Nightmare, which is the one with the shot on the scene on the sets of Friday the 13th Part 3.
Oh, Twisted Nightmare.
Yeah, so he was involved with that. He was the one who mentioned they had to give the nuns a fake script. And he also said that John Ireland refused to be made up by him, so why they had to change the ending, perhaps. Now, the thing that Erik was referring to was that Jimmy Elwell, or Timothy Elwell, who plays the biker with Michelle Bauer, said during their sex scene, which is the one where they said they had to kind of hold the door to stop the nuns coming in to find out what was going on. He said that to Michelle Bauer they were both naked and she was rubbing herself up and down him and left a snail trail of pussy juice on him.
Ew.
Oh, you lucky bastard.
Well, yeah.
I'm not kidding. I would let Michelle Bauer shit in my mouth. I'm not kidding.
Oh my God.
You can go have that bearded mountain man, Erik.
Dan Haggerty.
You can have him. You can go off and hunt bears together or something.
Yeah.
So the other porno connection was that I can't remember the character's name, but the ditzy blonde who gets decapitated in the scene that you mentioned, Joseph, about very much like the Hell Knight. Is it Suki Goodwin? Was it Suki Goodwin? I can't remember if it was her or no, it wasn't. It was the other one, wasn't it? Jenny Numa gets decapitated. So they kind of redid that kind of scene really with the character who was played by Jamie Summers, who was a hardcore starlet around that time and was famous apparently at the time as the Brat in pornos.
Was Jamie Summers not the name of the Bionic Woman played by Lindsay Wagner?
Yes, I think it might have been actually.
Ooh, and that would tie in with a Bionic suit.
It would, wow. Yes. But the guy that was in the bath with her, apparently, I can't remember his name now, but in that scene that you said you loved the song playing over, Nathan, he said that he was very aware of her modesty and stuff because she was very, he thought she seemed very demure. And then he found out that she'd been in some hardcore movies. So obviously was presumably somebody known to Nick Marino. There's an article, there's a clip, a little piece here from the book, and one of the people working on it says that Devorah Cutler and I were brought onto the project by Devon Fraser. Devon heard that porn producer Nick Marino wanted to make the leap from porno to horror films and was looking for screenwriters familiar with the horror genre like me. Devon and I drove up to Nick Marino's house in the Pacific Palisades to meet with him. Marino, short, paunchy, balding and cocky, seemed like a typical wise guy from the Bronx, complete with an accent and gold chain necklace. His furniture looked rented, and there were a couple of young porn actresses wandering around inside and outside by his pool. His home appeared to mainly function as a convenient place to shoot porn. I liked porn, so this setup didn't bother me. In fact, I sort of admired Marino for aspiring to break free from the skin flicks and go legit. I think that may have been actually talking about preparing Death House, which the John Saxon directed movie, which again didn't get a release until a little bit later. So, I think that's probably all I've got on the movie. There's a few other bits. Just one actually piece. I think it's Kenneth Hall says that he said, I saw the movie with Nick before it's shown in the theatre. So it got one movie showing in LA. And he said he had a VHS copy made. We watched it on his television. He was still somewhat enthusiastic about the movie at that point. When it later had a public screening, he introduced the movie. I wasn't there, but I was told that Nick was apologetic and almost embarrassed by how Terror Night had turned out. So apparently pretty much everyone said that they were going to take their name off the movie. So, a troubled production, and one that could still be sitting in obscurity if it hadn't been rescued by Fred Olen Ray in the mid-2000s. So that's kind of most of the background, I think. I have a little bit of background, but I shall mention that a brief bit when we get to the choice of song to play out with at the end of the movie. So anything left to say?
I've got something. Carla Barron, who played Lorraine, played in Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama.
What was
Can
that
you
movie
say the
again?
title, Justin?
Justin, what was the name of that film?
Sorority Babes in the Slime Bowl Bolorama.
Oh, very good.
Thank you. But I think it's one of those movies that possibly if they did a remake, as in not a remake of the movie, but actually kind of did a behind-the-scenes making of the movie. Because you can imagine all these nuns running around, peeking through windows, trying to see what they were doing. And then you've got Michelle Bauer sort of rutting naked in presumably a nun's bed. So anyway, well, it's a private time for Joseph.
Calm down, Joseph.
I've got a chest for her. She can leave a snail trail on. Snail trail, Eric. Snail trail.
Ew. This has been the most disgusting episode ever. Between that and her defecating in your mouth, it's just been horrible.
Yeah, you're lambasting me for defecation jokes, and yet you're the one who plays the every single episode. Yeah. There it is.
Okay, well, Eric.
Yes.
Yes. Are we ready for...
I think you are.
This.
It's my joke of the week. It's so freaking fantastic.
Why was John Arlen's character so useless at combat? Because he always used to throw his lance wayward.
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar...
Oh, I thought the Oscar was going to go to me.
Oh, maybe you could have impaled yourself on that gold statue, Eric.
Or done something with it.
That's what I mean.
Yes. What was the kind of feedback? What was the... I presume this... Because I noticed when I looked at the Facebook group, quite a few people hadn't seen or even heard of this movie before. So I'm kind of guessing. Yeah.
Out of a mere 26 votes, 43% of those listeners enjoyed Terror Night, 54% were neutral, and 3% did not enjoy the film. And our listener of the week is Dr. Butcher MD, and that stands for Medical Deviant, apparently. And he or she writes, it was 1987. The genre at that point had its best years behind it, and Terror Night has that vibe. I would agree with that. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can listen on most podcatchers and YouTube. Consider supporting the show via Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Or you can purchase some cool swag from our Redbubble shop. Just search for The Hysteria Continues on Google and you'll find us pretty much everywhere. And for feedback, our email address is thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And we've got some other feedback, haven't we, this time? Who would like to go first?
Okay, I've got one here. And it is from our friend Jay Bullington. He says, greetings podfathers, happy 10th birthday. I truly enjoyed the clip show on Patreon. So much fun going back to all those moments. Your show on the bird with the crystal plumage, or plumage as we now like to call it, was super enjoyable. Being older than all of you put together, that makes Jay quite old indeed. I remember that not long after Plumage, Tony Musante starred in a TV show called Toma. It only lasted one season, and I don't think I remember seeing him around much after that, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised after hearing what Argento thought of him. Many, many, many congratulations to you all on your 10th year celebration. May there be many more. I know I've said it before and others have said it as well, but listening to your show is just like hanging out with friends and talking about the stuff I love the most. Don't ever stop. Your fan forever, Jay Bullington, who is the producer and co-host of Have You Seen This One? And you can look them up on haveyouseenthis1.com. And I did indeed just check out what their most recent podcast was just before we started recording, and it's on To Kill a Mockingbird, which I think It's I think scientists have just studied this and proved that it's the complete opposite of Terror Night. They also cover a lot of films that we would have common ground with, like exploitation, horror, science fiction, that type of stuff. But they do delve into the sort of higher brow end of things as well, unlike us.
Well, I think we do delve into the highbrow sometimes, don't we? Well, thank you for writing in. And who else has got something? Nathan, do you have anything?
Just this one here. It says, "Greetings, Hysteria continues. Nathan is the greatest of all time. Signed, Nathan."
I see. Okay. You didn't make that
thank
up.
you, Nathan, for your very accurate.
Is that Nathan from 1 Nathan Street, Nathan in the state of Nathan?
Yes.
Oh, I think I know him, yeah.
I think that Nathan might have had a few too many Nathanians.
He's a good guy. He is like stellar.
Drinking stellar.
Actually, I don't
perhaps.
have any feedback.
I hear he has a small winkle.
How dare you?
Joseph, do you have anything?
No, don't have anything.
Right, well, I just have one here. It says, "To Justin, Joseph, Eric, and Nathan, I just wanted to wish all 4 of you fabulous gents many congratulations on a decade of amazing podcasting. The 10-year anniversary episode was brilliant and reminded me of just how much you've given us slasher fans over the years. The highlight had to be Eric's The Size of Laura's Arse joke, which I'd totally forgotten. It had me in hysterics all over again. Well, I'm glad that someone, but can't wait to see what the next 10 years brings. Any clues as to what the future might hold? Well, I imagine it'd be the same old shit." This person goes on to say, "Have you thought about a spin-off? The continuing Hysteria, maybe? Shorter minisodes featuring one of the foursome, each talking about other horror genres or slasher topics. Love to hear one about Justin's slasher collecting, Joseph's love affair with VHS, Nathan's filmmaking exploits, or Eric's toy obsession." Okay, maybe not the last one.
Hey!
This is true. This is true. David T, editor of films, all one word, .co.uk. So thank you, David. Yes, I think, who knows, maybe we will sort of, there might be an idea for some mini-sodes, although I don't know.
If I can't watch any recently seen, how am I going to do another podcast?
Well, you never know. You never know. And I mean, I'm sure, this Eric's, there's been quite a lot of, people have raised a couple of interesting points about Toya recently, haven't they, Eric?
Yes, she's been doing those YouTube videos with her husband, Robert Fripp, who played guitar on Heroes by David Bowie. And
they're married. I thought they were just like musical partners or something.
No, they're a couple. They've been married for 35 years now.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, so Toya is doing these lockdown videos where she sings and he plays the guitar, but she's wearing really tight tops and no bra. And her boobies are very pert for a 62-year-old lady.
They're very perky. I was shocked at that, actually.
Well, so it's nice for her to do something for her fan.
You're so rude. I don't see Susie doing anything to raise the spirits of the nation in these difficult times. She doesn't care.
That's not her job, is it? She wouldn't raise the spirits unless they were vodka.
Yeah, she would raise like dead spirits.
Yeah, from a graveyard.
Yeah.
Because she's so horrible and evil.
Yes. Well, we're covering, aren't we? We're going to be covering. We're doing our off-piste, aren't we, on Patreon at the moment? So we're going to doing Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory coming up.
Yes, and not the Fred Lincoln version of Willy Wankers and the.
No, but I watched it again today because it's streaming on YouTube and not YouTube, Netflix, and I've forgotten how crazy that movie is.
Yeah, Willy Wankers and the Fun Factory was the Fred J. Lincoln version, which is probably crazier. Yeah.
Well, the thing that really shocked me was I mean, we're obviously not going to talk about it much, but did you see that when they're going through the lake, going through the river, it goes psychedelic, and there's a scene where a real chicken gets decapitated.
Yeah, I know.
That was in the 100 Scariest Movie Moments.
Was it? Okay, I didn't remember that until I saw it, and because I just looking up some trivia on that, and I thought, wow, that's proper Mondo.
It is proper Mondo stuff, and I thought, oh, poor old Justin's not going to enjoy that bit because I'd forgotten about that section.
For a kid, I know Roald Dahl is pretty dark, but that's. But anyway, we'll save the talk for that. And presumably, we've our top 3 of 1975 has come out, so we're moving on to the year punk broke, 1976. So yes, should be fun. So, yeah, if you want to join us on
Here,
Patreon.
Susie was standing behind Johnny Rotten as he said bold words in the television.
Yeah. Well, Susie kicked it all off, didn't she? Because Bill Grundy said he wanted to do rude things to her. She said, I've always wanted to meet you. And he said, well, let's get to know each other better after the show. And then one of the Sex Pistols called him a dirty fucker.
Your father's a pig, your mother's a whore.
Well, I think you've kind of tipped the hat to what we're covering next time. So whose choice is it next time?
It's my choice next. And I have chosen J. Lee Thompson's 1983 Charles Bronson starring nudie slasher 10 to Midnight. And we are going to be joined, hopefully, by our good friend Amanda Reyes.
Excellent. Always a pleasure to have her on the show.
Yes.
So bringing lots of good insight and humour. So that should be a fun one. And probably go on longer than this one, which is about an hour and 10 minutes. But as long as we're over an hour, we don't feel like we cheated you.
Yes.
So, yeah. So anything left to say?
Bloody movie.
Tearing out. Well, I'll tell you what we're playing out with. I had a couple of ideas, but I was going to say the last bit of trivia was that in Runyon Canyon, which was the place in Los Angeles, it's where goth icon Roz Williams' ashes were scattered.
Who is Roz Williams?
The lead singer Christian Death. This is Christian Death, Spiritual Cramp, one of their biggest hits. It's never very many big hits.
Was it a hit? Yes.
It was on, I remember seeing it on, it was reviewed by Marky Smith from The Fall on something like I can't remember what it was called. It was on Channel 4 in the 80s. Do you remember the one? They used to have like late night and they used to get celebs to come on and review movies. That Susie did Stump. Does that ring any bells? I can't remember his name now. But anyway, Marky Smith didn't realise they were really gothy and they were about as gothy as you could possibly get. And a friend of mine auditioned to be, and she actually got, she was accepted into the band. And she didn't realise that she'd have to sort of go on stage in fishnets and with pictures of the Pope ripped up all around her. So she decided not to join the band. Right. Thank you for listening to The Hysteria Continues. From one bit of sheer class with Terror Night to another bit of sheer class with Charles Bronson holding a suck you off toy. So, yes, as ever, keeping it classy on The Hysteria Continues. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye, good people.
Farewell.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.